Hi, my name is Ethan, and I have created a public service announcement presentation regarding gasoline. So, in this presentation, I'll be talking about an overview of gasoline, what the problem with gasoline is, and how we can solve this particular issue. So, what is gasoline? Well, gasoline is a volatile liquid fuel, and volatile just means gasoline's ability to evaporate in low temperatures, which in turn makes it more flammable. Secondly, gasoline is a refined product, meaning that it undergoes many chemical reactions before being marketed and sold to consumers. Lastly, the primary use of gasoline is, of course, for fuel, and more specifically for vehicles, including cars, school buses, and motorcycles. Now, there are thousands of organizations or companies around the globe that market gasoline, which include BP, Shell, China Petrol, Saudi Aramco, and more. Secondly, what is it made of? What is gasoline made of? Well, gasoline comes from the natural resource of crude oil, extracted from underground reservoirs using oil drills. Now, crude oil comes from the remains of dead organisms, hence the name fossil fuels. Essentially, once these organisms, for example, animals and plants, are buried into the ground or sea floor, after millions and millions of years, layers and layers of sediments, sand, and rocks begin to bury those organisms deeper into the ground. And ultimately, along with a combination of extreme heat and pressure, fossil fuels are formed. Furthermore, the composition of gasoline, that is at the smallest scale, is that gasoline is made up of different liquid hydrocarbons. Hydrocarbons are essentially molecules consisting of hydrogen and carbon atoms. These hydrocarbons can include butane and isobutane, shown in the model above. Now, gasoline is typically composed of hydrocarbons that have a range of 4 to 12 carbon atoms linked together, also known as carbon chains. Lastly, gasoline has various additives, meaning particular substances incorporated into the gasoline to enhance its performance. This includes crazing, oxygenates, chloride, octane, etc. Different companies will have different additives into the gasoline. Lastly, what is the process of making it? The process of making gasoline. Well, the first stage in this process of creating gasoline is to obviously gather the natural resource of crude oil from the ground using oil drills, whether it's on land or on water. Now, there are many different methods of oil extraction, and some include percussion drilling, rotary drilling, directional drilling, fracking, etc. Now, the next stage in this process is to refine the crude oil. Crude oil by itself is not particularly useful because each amount of crude oil is composed of varying types of hydrocarbons, which some are too light and some are too dense or heavy. And that is why crude oil is refined to create different oil products. The first step in this refinery process of crude oil is called fractional distillation. Fractional distillation exploits the different boiling points of the hydrocarbons. So the crude oil is placed in a fractioning column or tower, which produces immense heat and essentially boils the crude oil. And in turn, the lighter hydrocarbons have a lower boiling point, so they evaporate and rise to the top of the tower. And the denser hydrocarbons have a high boiling point, so they stay at the bottom of the tower. And there are also hydrocarbons in between that rise to the middle, ultimately separating the hydrocarbons within the crude oil into different sections of the tower or column. And after the evaporation of the hydrocarbons has occurred, it condenses back into a liquid, which is then collected. Now, as mentioned before, gasoline mainly utilizes hydrocarbons with 4 to 12 carbon chains. However, lighter hydrocarbons include ethanol, which has 2 carbon chains, and heavier hydrocarbons like diesel has 20 carbon chains. And actually, the more dense the hydrocarbons are, the more thick they are in feel. The more dense the hydrocarbons are, the more thick they are in feel, whereas lighter hydrocarbons will have a more liquid and fluid motion. Now, what is the problem? What is the problem with gasoline? Firstly, machine and human activity can severely disturb wild animals' lifestyles, and this particularly disturbs marine ecosystems because seismic waves are sent into the ocean to create digital maps of the seafloor. These waves can often affect the oceanic animals if they are near the waves, and some of these animals include zooplankton, larval krill, and whales. Secondly, it is likely that accidents may occur during the oil extraction process, which may lead to the explosions of the pipelines, oil leaks, or oil spills, which is harmful offshore. When the oil rises to the top of the ocean surface, it can cover large amounts of area with a thin coating of oil. And this can kill seabirds, mammals, and just about any organism that gets coated or consumes the crude oil. This can also make seafood unsafe to consume. And in fact, there are around 2 large oil spills per year since 2010. The biggest oil spill that occurred was in 2010, named the BP Deepwater Horizon oil spill. This left approximately 205.8 million gallons of crude oil into the sea, and only 25% of it was recovered. From this catastrophic event, more than 82,000 seabirds and 6,000 sea turtles were killed or injured. Secondly, gasoline is a huge contributor of climate change. Climate change is a phenomenon in which the overall temperature of the Earth increases slightly over the years. When gasoline is burned in vehicle engines, it combines the carbon and oxygen atoms with each other, and in turn emits carbon dioxide. There are over 1 billion car users that run on gasoline in the world, and each vehicle will typically release around 4.6 metric tons of carbon dioxide into the air each year. And according to the statistic graph on the left, which shows the amount of gasoline used in America from 1990 to 2019, we see that there's a positive correlation, which means that as the year increases, the amount of gasoline used in the US increases significantly as well, starting at around 114 billion gallons in 1990, all the way to around 147 billion gallons in 2019. This implies that as the year increases, the amount of carbon dioxide released into the air also increases as well. Now, according to the NASA graph on the right, which shows the change in the Earth's temperature or climate from 1880 to 2020, there is also a positive correlation between the year and change in temperature that year, meaning that the Earth is significantly heating. When observing both graphs, we can see that there's a correlation and causation between the two, because when the amount of gasoline used increases, it causes the change in temperature of the Earth to increase as well. Now, climate change can severely damage wild organisms, habitats, and ecosystems. But how? So the reason why climate change is so bad for the environment is because it causes ice loss in the Arctic. The graph above displays the amount of ice loss in the Arctic from 1979 to 2020. This is a very serious problem, as there exist several species of organisms that live within the millions of square kilometers of ice, and they are losing their habitats due to ice loss. These animals include the polar bear, the Arctic fox, the Pacific walrus, and obviously many more animals who are in the same situation as them. When observing this graph, you can see that there is a negative correlation, in that the total length of ice is decreasing over the years and decades. And when looking at both graphs, which the bottom one is the same graph as previously, we see that there is a correlation and causation again, because the increase in temperature causes more ice to melt, hence the decrease. From this, we know that due to an increase in gasoline usage, there was an increase in temperature of the Earth, which lastly encourages ice loss in the Arctic. But why am I addressing all these issues to you? What's the purpose? Well, it's because all of these problems relate to the SDG 12, responsible consumption and production, but particularly the fact that we're not acting in accordance to SDG 12 because us people are not being fully aware of our environmental footprints, and in this case through purchasing gasoline, which includes harvesting and refining crude oil that kills thousands and thousands of sea animals each year, and using gasoline releases large amounts of carbon dioxide into the air, contributing to climate change, a direction this planet will not benefit from. But how can we solve this issue? And this is what I want to share with you in this presentation. The first solution we have is we should consider using alternatives to gasoline, of course. And there are several alternatives to gasoline. However, biofuels in particular are becoming more popular. Biofuels are created from renewable resources, including plants, algae, animal waste, etc. Now, one example of a biofuel would be bioethanol. Bioethanol is a flammable, colorless liquid, which is made by fermenting the sugars found in grains, including corn, sugarcane, and barley, using yeast. Usually, bioethanol is blended with gasoline, When at a gas station, you're usually approached with two blended ethanol options, which include up to 15% and up to 85% ethanol infused gasoline, which is usually expressed as E15 and E85. The second biofuel I want to introduce to you is biodiesel. Biodiesel is produced using vegetable oil and animal fat. Biodiesel can be used in either its pure form or blended with regular diesel fuel. Biofuels are more sustainable than gasoline. Biofuels are more sustainable than gasoline as they are created from renewable resources, meaning that the resources are easily replaced, like corn and sugarcane, which takes a couple of months to grow. However, gasoline is made from fossil fuels, which takes millions of years to form. Furthermore, biofuels also emit low amounts of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, causing less harm than gasoline. Now, let's discuss the two sides to this solution, which are the positive and negative aspects or factors. Now, the negative aspect to this solution is related to the environment. Basically, biofuels require large amounts of land to grow the crops necessary to create it, which can reduce the amount of agricultural land available to farmers that use the land to grow food that is actually consumed. However, the positive factor regarding biofuel is related to the economy. Basically, biofuels are relatively cheaper than gasoline, estimated to be around 2.25 US dollars for E85 gasoline and 3.29 US dollars for E15 gasolines and 3.18 US dollars for blended biodiesel, whereas gasoline is estimated to cost around 4.26 US dollars. Now, the second solution I want to introduce to you is also related to biofuels as well. Different companies and scientists are currently working on producing and developing new biofuels, including companies like Arizona Biodiesel, America Biofuels Corp, ADM, and REG. Essentially, this solution proposes that people should consider to invest in such biofuel companies so that biofuels can completely replace gasoline and one day even erase our environmental footprints completely. Now, the downside to this solution is related to the economy, and more specifically, the fact that such money is not available to everyone. So, this solution is actually only targeted to a specific range of people. However, there's a huge positive factor to this solution, which is also related to economy, in that investing into such companies also has the potential of receiving returns, especially high returns. Now, the last solution I want to introduce to you is to instead of taking a vehicle to your desired destination, we could just avoid using them whenever possible. And I'm not saying to avoid driving in vehicles completely, but it would benefit to travel only when absolutely necessary. For example, when traveling short distances, it is better to just walk or bike there. Or for longer distances, you could consider taking the subway or taking a bus that runs on electricity. This way, it minimizes the amount of gasoline used and will help to decrease the gasoline usage in this world and hopefully preserve our environment. However, there's a social factor to this solution, which is the fact that many people enjoy moments where they can listen to music and feel the breeze of the air conditioning or the wind outside from an open window, resisting those people to consider the solution. Now, the positive aspect to the solution is related to health, actually. If this solution is implemented, people will be able to be more active and to stay healthy. Driving a vehicle usually burns anywhere around 80 to 130 calories per hour. However, walking and biking burn a substantially greater amount, coming at around 210 to 360 calories per hour for walking and 450 to 750 calories per hour for biking around the world. Back to the SDG idea. The following solutions, using biofuels, investing into biofuel producing companies, and using different traveling methods are ways that you, yourself, can contribute to decrease the amount of gasoline used and produced in order to save and preserve the environment and organisms in this world.